The years leading to the reign of Helm Hammerhand, the 9th king of Rohan, was stifled with unrest, as ancestral conflicts were slowly reignited. When Eorl and his people were granted Calenardhon, Rohan as would later be known, in the year 2510 of the Third Age, they drove the Wildmen from their new lands, earning their bitter hatred and enmity. The last of the Wildmen were driven out from the vales of the White Mountains by the men of Gondor and by Aldor the Old, the 3rd king of Rohan. They then congregated in Dunland and came to be known as the Dunlendings. They never forgot their grievance with the Strawheads. Seeking to take back what was theirs, the Wildmen grew bolder and began making sorties into the outlying settlements of Rohan and raided its herd of horses. As I mentioned in a previous video, J.R.R, Helm's grandfather, soon learned that the Dunlendings had occupied Isengard, long neglected by Gondor, and had turned the stronghold into a staging ground for their incursions. Succeeding his father Gram as lord of the Eorlingas, Helm was a man of great strength, determined and grim, with a fierce love for his family. His line lay secured by his sons, Haleth and Hama. Aside from the northwestern threat posed by the Dunlendings camped in Isengard, the king's reign was also troubled by the growing power of one of his thanes, Freca. A wealthy lord and landowner in the Westmarch, with his own stronghold, Freca claimed to be descended from Freawain, the 5th king of Rohan, although his dark hair argued instead that much Dunlendish blood coursed through his veins. Whatever the case, he had little love for the kings of Rohan. Freca paid little heed to Helm's summons, attending his councils only when he saw fit. Helm in turn mistrusted Freca, and rightfully so. At one of the royal councils, Freca rode to Edoras with armed men to seek the hand of Helm's daughter in marriage for his son Wulf. But Helm saw the truth very clearly. Freca did not seek an alliance, but a throne. Denied an immediate answer, and mocked for his belly, a not so subtle allusion that his large ambitions had grown to fit his tunic, Freca reviled Helm and threatened him, ominously saying that
all kings that refuse a prophet's staff may fall on their knees.
Ignoring his thane's threats, the king remarked that the marriage proposal was but a trifle, which they would be free to discuss later, and bid him wait until the council's end. After the council, Helm laid his heavy hand on Freca's shoulder and forced him to walk out of Edoras with him, for the golden hall of Meduseld was no place for a brawl. Outnumbered by Helm's men, Freca's retinue slowly drew back.
Now, Dunlending, said the king, you have only Helm to deal with, alone and unarmed, but you have said much already, and it is my turn to speak. Freca, your folly has grown with your belly. You talk of a staff. If Helm dislikes a crooked staff that is thrust upon him, he breaks it. So!
Helm then smote Freca with one heavy blow of his hammer hand, and Freca fell to the ground, dead as a doornail. Helm then proclaimed Freca's son, Wulf, and the rest of his household his enemies, and they fled. But that was not the end of the king's troubles, for Wulf, son of Freca, would prove to be a far more ruthless and cunning adversary than his father. Finding refuge in Dunland, he was welcomed with open arms by the Dunlendings. Becoming lord of the Hill Tribes of Wildmen, Wulf then found allies in the corsairs of Umbar, who were hiring themselves out as mercenaries, and among Sauron's servants, the nomadic Southrons and Easterlings. Whether looking for vengeance, being sellswords from foreign lands, or loyal servants of Sauron, all these wicked men were united by their hatred for Rohan and Gondor. Their alliance would prevent the two kingdoms from helping one another. 4 years later, great fleets from Umbar and Harad assailed the coasts of Gondor. With Gondor distracted, the Wildmen seized their chance and came down from Isengard, and were joined by the eastern invaders who came up the rivers Lefnui and Isen. After defeating the defenders of Rohan at the fords of Isen, Wulf's army made its way to Edoras and broke through. There, Helm's eldest son, Haleth, was slain, defending the doors of Meduseld. Edoras was lost. Beset on all sides, Helm and his people sought refuge in the Hornburg, in the gorge that would later become known as Helm's Deep, where they strove to survive not only the onslaught, but the long winter that was about to begin. Others of the Rohirrim that were not slain or enslaved gathered at Dunharrow under Helm's nephew, Frealaf. As for the invaders, Wulf took Edoras and sat in Meduseld and called himself king. The Wildmen and the eastern invaders pursued the king and his people and laid siege to Hornburg, defending the beleaguered stone walls and weakened by hunger and the cold of the long winter. Helm's younger son Halef ventured out of the Hornburg without his father's permission with a company of men to seek food, but they never returned. Driven to fury by the grief at the loss of both his sons and by desperation, Helm took to dealing with the Dunlendings and their allies into his own hammer hands. Without any armor, the king would venture out of the stronghold alone and come down upon the enemy camps, slaying the invaders with his bare hands. Helm had a great horn, and soon it was marked that before he sallied forth, he would blow a blast upon it that echoed in the deep. And then so great a fear fell on his enemies that instead of gathering to take him or kill him, they fled away down the combe. One night men heard the horn blowing, but Helm did not return. In the morning there came a sun-gleam, the first for long days, and they saw a white figure standing still on the dike, alone, for none of the Dunlendings dared come near. There stood Helm, dead as a stone, but his knees were unbent. The long winter would end soon after. Having fended off the attack from Umbar and Harad and pushed through the long winter, Gondor now rushed to Rohan's aid. Then Frealaf, son of Hild, Helm's sister, came down out of Dunharrow, to which many had fled, and with a small company of desperate men he surprised Wulf in Meduseld and slew him and regained Edoras. With Wulf's death, the siege of the Hornburg was finally broken. The eastern invaders were slain or fled, and the Wildmen, now leaderless, were driven out. Frealaf then surrounded Isengard and starved the Dunlendings out until they capitulated. Helm's body was brought back to Edoras for a proper royal burial, and Frealaf succeeded his uncle as the 10th King of Rohan. The wizard Saruman appeared at the crowning, praising the Horse Lord's courage and wooing them with gifts. Welcomed by both King Frealaf and Beren, the steward of Gondor, he soon settled in the Tower of Orthanc at Isengard. A friend and ally he long seemed, but he was soon brought low by his pride and greed. Though, warned by Gandalf, the White Council may have begun to doubt Saruman's designs as regarded the ring. Not even Gandalf knew that he had become an ally or servant of Sauron. The War of the Rohirrim had also left Rohan very weakened. The population had been reduced by killing, famine and drought, and many of their prized horses, as well as cattle, had died. The orcs of the White Mountains also troubled the kingdom for a while, carrying out their master's command to harry the peoples of Rohan and Gondor. It would not be until the reign of Folkwyne, the 14th king, that the realm would recover its former strength. Helm's legacy would endure to the gorge that bore his name. Years later, when the wizard Saruman tried to deliver Rohan to his dark master, Theoden King chose to make his famous stand at Helm's Deep. Honestly, I can't wait for The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim to release. I'm really looking forward to it, especially to see how it fleshes out Tolkien's tale. Let me know what you think. As always, thank you for watching.